around real train tracks being pulled by a real locomotive, we should be in Chicago in about 2 hours. Just kidding. But we are on a real train this afternoon, and while we're on the train and the train is in motion, the museum asks that we could all please maintain our seats. Also, we're in our open-air car this afternoon. If we could all keep ourselves within the railings and the canopy, that would also be greatly appreciated. It is a hot one today, and safety is very important to us here at the National Railroad Museum. So if you do feel like you need something cold to drink, there is some water available. Just know that the water supply is limited. We'll be making 2 rounds around the museum's grounds today. We'll have a lot of things to say about the trains along the way. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If not, enjoy the ride. Observation track to the train's right. I'd like to direct your attention to the first car on the line, this brown, strange-looking piece of railroading equipment. Since it looks so strange, we often get asked here at the museum, well, what is it? This is something called the Jordan Spreader. The Jordan Spreader is ballast between the ties and rails of track so that track can be usable. The Jordan Spreader also had a wing on each side that could be lowered down to keep greatest trenches. The Jordan Spreader also had another configuration where they put a V-shaped snow plow on it and it would plow snow. The Jordan Spreader is still in use today. They are mostly used for plowing snow. Question we often get asked here at the museum is, what is our oldest locomotive? We're actually going to pass it here in a second. It's on the east end of the McCormick Train Pavilion, all the way to the left. Number 24. It was built in 1910 by the American Locomotive Company in their Pittsburgh works. It was built for the Lake Superior and Ishpeming Railroad. It carried passengers and freight along the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. about to go over a crossing, and the engineer will sound the train horn. These two train cars that we're passing here, if you look closely at them, and then look closely at the National Railroad Museum's Josephine car that's riding right in front of us, you realize that they're very similar. That's because they both come from the same train set. I'm going to make a quick stop here right next to this red boxcar. Like to get up when the train has fully stopped, you better see the symbols on the boxcar you may. If we were to travel back in time in our country just after the Civil War, many northern soldiers found themselves in the south without a ride back home to the north. If these soldiers had a little bit of money, what they would do is they'd buy a ticket on the passenger trains, and that's how they'd get home. If not, some of them might choose to jump on a freight train illegally. If you were to ask these people where they were going, they would tell you, I'm homeward bound. If you take the first two letters out of homeward and the first two letters out of bound, you get hobo. Fast forward to the 1930s, the Great Depression in our country. Hobos are still around, except this time they're going town to town looking for work. The hobos during this time period sort of had a culture unto themselves, and had their own language too. On the boxcar here, we have some symbols that hobos during this time period would have used. The first thing that a hobo would have done is he or she would shed their real name and become a symbol and take on a road name. That's the first signature here of the clown. That's the signature of a very famous hobo by the name of Bozo, or the Clown Man. We also had ladies who rode the rails and who hoboed during this time period. That's the next signature to the right of a very famous hobo lady named Boxcar Betty. Now the symbols to the right of the door are symbols that hobos would have used to warn each other on the road about certain things in certain places. The square with the dot in the middle of it was the hobo sign for danger. Here it's displayed over a wavy line which symbolizes water, so you get dangerous water. Your fellow travelers are trying to warn you of water that might be unsafe to drink, or a river that's unsafe to cross. The next two symbols, if you saw these symbols while you were on the train, you would probably stay on the train and go through this town. You wouldn't get off the train looking for work in that town. The tic-tac-toe board is actually representing the bars on a jail cell. Hobo saw this and knew that if he got caught in this town, he'd most likely get thrown in jail for vagrancy. The last symbol, the upside-down Y, was probably the most serious symbol that a hobo could see. This told the hobo that in this town they were very protective of their jobs, and did not like hobos coming in and trying to get some work. So if a hobo was caught in this town, he would most likely get beaten up by the local police force, or even local citizens, and taken to the edge of town told never to come back. There are still people who jump on freight trains today. It is much harder to jump on a freight train today, however. The trains are much faster, they're much bigger, they're also very well secured. We're going to get moving here.
That was interesting.
right, we're passing the McCormick Train Pavilion, which is this open-air pavilion with lots of trains sticking out of it. Definitely a stop to make while you're exploring the grounds here today. I'd like to direct your attention to the silver aerodynamic-looking train, the number 2 on its nose, all the way to the left. This is something called the Aero Train. It was built in the 1950s by General Motors to try to encourage people back to passenger rail service. The thought process behind the Aero Train was that they could use existing technologies that were proven and combine them all to make a lightweight, inexpensive, fast train. The coaches of the Aero Train were built out of intercity bus bodies that GM would have already been producing, but instead of road tires, they put on railroad tires. The problem with the Aero Train that it used the same suspension system as these buses would have used. It was designed to go 100 miles an hour, but as soon as the train hit speeds of 60 miles an hour, the suspension system failed and became a very bumpy ride. On the Aero Train's test runs, there were reports of people getting bumped out of their seats and getting bruised because of all the problems. Several railroads tried out the Aero Train and all returned them back to General Motors within the first few months, saying thanks but no thanks because of all the problems. They were eventually sold to the Rock Island Railway to be used at low speeds for commuter service in Chicago. There was only 2 of them ever made. We're lucky enough to have one here.